I first saw him through my peephole. Yeah, I know how that sounds. Creepy, right? But in my defense, I was trying to figure out who kept slamming the stairwell door every morning around 7:45, right when I was usually making coffee in my boxers. And that's when I saw him. Black hoodie, headphones, bed hair that looked like it belonged in a Calvin Klein ad. He was moving in, apparently. Cardboard boxes, a slightly beat-up guitar case, and a dog, a medium-sized mutt that looked as confused as he did. I watched him wrestle a box through the narrow hallway, curse under his breath, and nearly trip over the dog. I stepped back from the peephole, heart racing for no good reason. New neighbor. A hot new neighbor. I didn't think much of it after that. Okay, that's a lie. I thought about it a lot. Every time I passed the door across the hall, or heard music thumping faintly through my wall, or found another weirdly charming coffee mug in the shared laundry room sink. But I never said anything. We were just two strangers who happened to live in the same building. Then, 2 weeks later, my shower stopped working. It was a Saturday morning, and I had just gotten back from a run. I was gross, sweaty, and the water pressure in my unit had vanished to a trickle. I groaned and checked the pipes. Nothing. Called the landlord. Voicemail, and that's when I made the worst and best decision of my adult life. I knocked on his door. He opened it wearing plaid pajama pants, no shirt, and a look that said he didn't expect visitors. His dog barked once and then flopped onto the rug behind him. Hey, I said, already regretting everything. Sorry to bother you. I'm across the hall. My name's Drew, and my shower's busted, and I have, a meeting in an hour, and he raised an eyebrow. You want to use my shower? I'll be quick, I swear. Look, I smell like regret and running shoes. It's an emergency. A pause. Then he stepped aside. Shower's down the hall, last door on the left. Don't use all the hot water. I blinked. Seriously? You said it's an emergency. I hesitated in the doorway. You're not gonna murder me while I'm rinsing off, right? He smirked. Depends how much hot water you use. That was how it started. A broken shower, an awkward request, and a smirk that stuck with me for hours after. I didn't know it yet, but my new neighbor was about to become something I hadn't let myself hope for in a long time. Someone who saw through the version of myself I showed the world, and liked me anyway. The shower was amazing, not just in a wow functioning plumbing kind of way, but in that quiet homey sense, like someone actually lived here and cared about the space. There were eucalyptus-scented products, a towel that didn't feel like sandpaper, and a little speaker playing low indie music I vaguely recognized but couldn't name. I dried off and stared at myself in the fogged mirror, wondering what kind of guy just lets a stranger borrow his shower. Generous, reckless, or just weirdly confident. I couldn't tell. When I stepped out in my clean clothes, still damp around the collar, he was in the kitchen making coffee. He didn't say anything, just nodded toward the counter. Made extra, he said. I hesitated. You always make extra for the neighbor who breaks into your apartment and uses your water? He shrugged, pouring a second mug. I figure you owe me a clean mug now. That weird raccoon one in the laundry room's probably yours. I laughed, taking the cup. It might be. We stood in the quiet, sipping coffee. His dog, Maisie, he introduced her, sniffed my leg, then flopped over onto her side like I'd passed some unspoken test. I'm Simon, by the way, he said. Drew, I replied, even though I'd already said it earlier. It felt more real this time, less like a panicked intro, and more like the start of something. Simon leaned back against the counter. So what do you do, Drew, from across the hall? I design app interfaces. Basically, I sit at my desk for 10 hours a day and make things look clean and clickable. Glamorous stuff. He smiled. Sounds important. It's really not. You? I teach high school English, 9th and 10th grade. That surprised me. I wouldn't have guessed teacher from his tattoos and the tired circles under his eyes. Do the kids like you? Some of them. The rest think I'm too sarcastic and don't give enough homework. I laughed. Sounds like you're doing it right. Simon's smile lingered for a second too long. Then he glanced at the clock. I should take Maisie out before it gets too hot. Right, yeah, I should, go fix my shower. Or wait for the landlord to ignore me again. He walked me to the door. Anytime you need to use the shower, just knock. Seriously, that offer hung in the air between us. I could have made a joke, something light to cut the tension. But I didn't. I just nodded. Thanks, Simon. No problem, Drew. As I stepped back into my apartment, mug still warm in my hand, I felt something shift. Not just because I had finally met the guy who slammed the stairwell door every morning, not even because I now knew he smelled like eucalyptus and brewed strong coffee. It was the way he looked at me, not like a stranger or a neighbor, but like someone who might actually matter. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. Not drastically, just subtly. Simon and I didn't start hanging out all the time or anything like that. We didn't become inseparable, but the casual hallway nods turned into brief conversations, then into shared cups of coffee on Sunday mornings when we both happened to be up early, then into an unspoken ritual. I'd bring over a baked good, usually store-bought and half stale, and he'd make the coffee. It wasn't a friendship exactly. It was something looser, more undefined. Then came the rain. It had been pouring all day, classic early spring stuff. That drizzly, bone-deep kind of cold that makes you want to stay inside under a blanket. I was working from home that afternoon, huddled over my laptop, when I heard the knock. Not a text, not a message, a literal knock on my door. I opened it and found Simon, soaked to the bone, holding a dripping dog leash and looking half apologetic, half furious. Sorry, he said, brushing wet hair from his eyes. Can I? Maisie slipped her collar in the hallway. She came this way. Right on cue, I heard the scrabble of nails behind my couch. I stepped aside, and Maisie bolted past me into Simon's legs, tail wagging like this had all been a game. Simon sighed, crouching to clip her leash back on. Little menace. She's got good taste, I offered, closing the door behind them. I mean, if I were a dog, I'd hide here too. He looked up at me, dripping water onto my floor. You're not helping. I laughed and tossed him a towel from the kitchen. He caught it with one hand, rubbing it through his hair. The sight of him like that, wet t-shirt clinging to his chest, hoodie tied around his waist, and that tired, grateful smile, did something weird to my chest. You want to hang here a minute? I asked, quieter than I meant to. You're kind of flooding my entryway. He looked at the puddle around his shoes and nodded. Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt your workday. I waved it off. Trust me. You saved me from pretending to fix a color palette for the third time. He stepped out of his wet sneakers and followed me into the kitchen. I poured us both a mug of the leftover morning brew, and we sat in silence for a while, him on the stool, me leaning against the counter. Maisie curled up on my rug like she owned the place. This is nice, Simon said finally, cradling the mug in his hands. The coffee? No. This, the quiet, the company. My heart stumbled a little at that. There was something in the way he said it. Something gentle. Almost too open. You ever get tired of being alone? He asked, not looking at me. I wasn't sure how to answer, because the truth was, yes, absolutely. But I also didn't know if he meant it the way I was hearing it. Sometimes, I said carefully, but sometimes it feels easier, less complicated. He nodded slowly. Yeah. We sat in silence again, but this time it felt heavy, like there was something neither of us wanted to say. Then he stood, setting the mug in the sink. I should head back, he said, his voice soft. I walked him to the door. He paused before opening it, his hand on the doorknob. Thanks, Drew. For what? He hesitated. Then, being easy to talk to. I wanted to say something back, something meaningful. But he was already opening the door, leash in hand, dog at his side. and just like that, he was gone again. But something had changed, and I couldn't stop wondering if maybe, just maybe, he felt it too. The next time we talked, it was nearly midnight. I was brushing my teeth, shirtless, standing in the glow of the bathroom mirror, when I heard a knock. Soft. Hesitant. The kind that made your stomach tighten before you even moved. I grabbed a hoodie off the chair, not bothering to zip it, and opened the door to find Simon standing there in sweatpants and a faded band t-shirt, barefoot and kind of lost looking. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Sorry, you up?" I nodded, stepping back automatically to let him in. "Yeah, come in. Everything okay?" He walked in like he didn't know why he was there, like he'd been pacing in front of his own door before finally knocking. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "Kept thinking about stuff." "You ever do that?" "All the time," he nodded, not making eye contact. I didn't want to just sit there. Felt like I'd go insane. We sat on the couch, the TV off, the apartment dimly lit by the lamp in the corner. Maisie, surprisingly, wasn't with him this time. Simon leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I keep thinking I'm screwing everything up. With work, life. Just, I don't know, some nights it all feels heavier. His voice cracked a little at the end, and it made my chest hurt. Because I'd been there, not in the exact way, but in that same gray space of doubt and exhaustion, where you don't even know what you need. "You're not screwing it up," I said. "You're tired. That's different." Simon exhaled. "You're a better listener than most people I've paid to do it." We both smiled at that, but it didn't break the tension between us. If anything, it made it worse. Or more real. He shifted on the couch, turning slightly to face me. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Yeah, anything." He studied me for a second. Do you ever think, maybe you're hiding parts of yourself so well that you forget how to be honest, even when you want to be?" That hit harder than I expected. I swallowed. "Yeah, I think about that a lot." We sat there, breathing in that shared silence, the air thick with things neither of us had the right words for. Simon's hand rested near mine on the couch cushion. Not touching, just close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. "I think I've been doing that," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "For a long time." I looked at him, trying to read the flicker in his eyes, the edge of something he wasn't sure how to say. And then he moved. Not fast, not dramatic. Just a slow shift forward, like he was giving me time to back away if I wanted to. But I didn't even think. I leaned in too. Our lips met in the softest, most hesitant kiss I've ever felt. Like we were both holding our breath. Like we were scared of what it meant. When we pulled apart, Simon kept his eyes closed for a second, then opened them, searching my face. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said. "Me neither," I said, my voice shaking. "But that doesn't mean we shouldn't." He leaned his forehead against mine, and for the first time since I met him, Simon looked unguarded, not tired, not jaded, just vulnerable. We stayed like that for a long time, the quiet holding us together, and when he finally stood to leave, he didn't say goodbye. He just looked at me and said, "See you tomorrow?" "Yeah," I said. "See you tomorrow." The next morning was quiet in the building. No slamming stairwell doors, no hallway chatter. Just the low hum of someone vacuuming 3 floors below and the occasional bark from Maisie, muffled through Simon's door. I stood in my kitchen, staring into my coffee mug like it owed me answers. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was stressed, though, let's be honest, I was, but because I couldn't stop replaying the night before. The way Simon had looked at me, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to want what he wanted. The way his lips lingered against mine just a moment too long, like he was afraid it would disappear if he let go too quickly. I was still half lost in my head when my phone buzzed. "Simon, you up?" I smiled stupidly. "Me, kinda. Coffee's on." 10 minutes later, there was a knock. He looked more like himself than he had last night. Hoodie zipped halfway, hair damp from a quick shower, dog leash in hand. But there was something in his eyes, a cautiousness maybe, a hesitation he hadn't had before. "Hey," I said. "Hey." We stood there. neither of us quite sure what to do with our hands or where to look. "I brought muffins," he said eventually, holding up a brown paper bag like it was a peace offering. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. Just figured it'd make the morning less weird." I stepped aside to let him in. "It's not weird." He raised an eyebrow. "It's a little weird," I laughed. "Okay, maybe. A tiny bit." Maisie trotted in ahead of him like she lived here now, curling up in her usual corner. I poured coffee, he set the muffins on the counter, and we fell into the kind of silence that's only awkward when you're trying to pretend it's not. "I meant what I said last night," he said after a moment. "I don't know what I'm doing with any of this." "You don't have to have it all figured out," I said. "I sure as hell don't." Simon leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "You've known who you are for a long time though, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Since high school." He looked away. "I didn't. Or maybe I did, and just didn't want to admit it." I could feel the weight in his words, the kind of weight that builds up over years of biting your tongue and laughing at the wrong jokes, the kind that wears you down slowly. "I guess I spent a long time making sure no one ever had a reason to ask questions," he said. I moved closer, not touching, but close enough that he'd know I wasn't going anywhere. "You're allowed to figure it out at your own pace." Simon met my eyes. "What if I don't know where this goes?" Then we figured it out together. There was a pause, then a breath of relief in his shoulders. "Okay," he said. "Together sounds good." We didn't kiss again that morning. We didn't need to. Instead, we sat on the couch with coffee and split the muffins in half. He liked blueberry, I liked banana nut. Maisie snored between us. The sun streamed through the window like it was giving us permission to just be. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't some dramatic moment where Simon grabbed my face and declared he was all in. There were no flowers, no sweeping confessions in the rain. What happened instead was quieter, and, in a way, so much more real. It started with little things, like the way he'd text me late at night just to ask if I was still awake, even when he clearly already knew I was. Or the way he started bringing over more than just muffins, containers of leftovers from his Sunday meal preps, a half dozen new teas he wanted me to try, even a potted basil plant that ended up living on my windowsill. We didn't talk about that night on the couch. Not at first. It just lingered, a warm undercurrent beneath everything we did, and maybe that was enough for a while. But I felt it every time we sat a little too close on the couch. Every time his knee brushed mine and didn't move. Every time he laughed at something I said and looked at me like he was still surprised I was real. One Friday night, he invited me over for dinner. Not a let's grab takeout kind of thing. A full-on, cooked-from-scratch meal. I offered to help, but he waved me off and told me to bring a bottle of wine and my appetite. When I walked in, the apartment smelled like garlic and something buttery. Maisie barked once and then retreated to her bed with a toy in her mouth. Simon was barefoot, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that said, "Shakespeare is my homeboy." I held up the wine. "Classy, right?" He grinned. "It'll pair nicely with my subpar pasta skills." He made linguine with shrimp and spinach in a lemon cream sauce. It wasn't subpar, it was incredible. And as we ate, the tension that had been tiptoeing around us for weeks finally sat down at the table, pulled up a chair, and stared us in the face. After dinner, we stood by the sink, washing dishes side by side. Our hands bumped once, then twice. On the third time, he didn't pull away. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. I waited, not trusting myself to speak. I've been waiting for some big sign, like a moment that would make everything make sense. But I think this is it. You're it. I turned to him, heart thudding like I'd just run a mile. Simon swallowed hard, then looked up. "I want to see where this goes. With you. Even if I'm scared." I reached for his hand. "I've been scared too." But you were still brave enough to knock on my door, he said, squeezing my fingers. I smiled. Your shower did most of the work. He laughed, the sound breaking the last bit of tension between us. Then he leaned in and kissed me. Not hesitantly this time, not like he was unsure. This one was soft but sure, warm and steady, like he'd decided. And when we pulled apart, neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. Because sometimes, choosing someone isn't about fireworks or perfect timing. Sometimes, it's about letting go of the fear and staying when it's easier to run. We didn't rush into anything after that night. There weren't declarations or labels, no sudden social media posts or matching keychains. Just mornings that began with shared coffee instead of texts, and nights where Maisie curled up at our feet while we quietly existed in the same room. Simon kept things steady. Sometimes he'd come home from school exhausted, toss his bag onto the floor of my apartment without saying a word, and collapse on the couch next to me. Other times, he'd show up with energy to burn, challenging me to cook-offs or dragging me out on impromptu walks to nowhere. But the thing that struck me the most was how natural it felt. There was no pressure to define every moment, no constant tug-of-war between who we were and who we thought we were supposed to be. It was just us, figuring things out together. One Sunday afternoon, we were lying in bed, him reading, me half asleep with my head on his chest, when he spoke. My mom called, he said, his voice barely louder than the ceiling fan above us. I shifted, looking up. Yeah? She asked if I was seeing anyone. I paused. What did you say? He didn't answer right away, just ran his hand gently through my hair. I said maybe. Maybe? I wanted to say yes, he said, but I wasn't sure if we were there yet. I propped myself up on one elbow, looking at him fully. Simon, we've been unofficially dating for like a month. We've met each other's weird habits. You've taken over half my fridge, he smirked. You're saying that qualifies as official? I'm saying, I think we've earned the right to say it out loud. He nodded slowly. Yeah, you're right. Then, after a beat, I'm seeing someone. His name's Drew. He's got a broken shower and questionable coffee choices, but he's kind of amazing. I smiled, feeling something settle in my chest. Something warm and solid. Simon, I said, you realize your shower saved my life, right? He laughed. Guess I'll never be able to move then. Not unless you're planning on taking me with you. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. That's the idea. The weeks that followed felt like watching a sunrise through a window. Slow, quiet, inevitable. He started spending more nights at my place than his. We merged Netflix accounts, shared grocery lists, argued about laundry. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being about what we were, and just became who we were. One night, as we lay tangled together on the couch, he whispered into my hair, I never thought I'd get this. I pulled back, just enough to look at him. This? He nodded. Someone who sees me, all of me, and doesn't walk away. I kissed him, soft and sure. I'm not going anywhere, and I meant it. Because sometimes, love doesn't come in with fireworks or dramatic music. Sometimes, it knocks on your door, soaking wet, holding a dog leash, and asking to borrow your hot water. And if you're lucky, you answer. 6 months later, Simon's toothbrush lives in my bathroom. That's not a metaphor. It literally sits in the ceramic holder next to mine, blue for him, green for me. And sometimes, when I'm brushing my teeth half asleep in the morning, I glance at it and smile like an idiot. He still has his apartment across the hall. Technically, but the last time he slept there was when I had food poisoning and told him I was too disgusting to be around. He stayed up all night texting me from across the hall anyway. Most of his stuff is here now. His hoodie's on my hooks, his books on my shelves, his dog asleep in my bed. It's not official in a lease kind of way, but it's ours in every way that counts. Some nights we still end up talking late, way past when we should be asleep, about nothing in particular. He'll lie with his head on my stomach, asking if I think life ever really makes sense. I'll run my fingers through his hair and say probably not, but at least we're not figuring it out alone. He told his parents about me a couple months ago. Said the conversation wasn't perfect, but it wasn't bad either. They asked a lot of questions. He answered the ones he could. And when they came to visit last month, his mom hugged me like she already knew me. His dad talked to me about baseball for a solid hour like we were old friends. It was weird in the best possible way. The landlord finally fixed my shower, by the way. We still use Simon's, not because we have to, because it's kind of our thing now. Our little piece of how this all started. Sometimes I think about that first knock on his door. The way I was embarrassed and sweaty and just desperate enough to ask for help. And I realized that one small, awkward moment led me straight into the best part of my life. Love didn't show up the way I expected. It didn't make a grand entrance or announce itself. It just quietly moved in across the hall, brought coffee, shared muffins, and gave me every reason to believe that sometimes the most unexpected people turn out to be exactly what you need. Simon reaches for my hand while we're brushing our teeth, and I squeeze it back without thinking. Yeah, this is home.